you all for being here this afternoon. I am Dr. Rachel Buhner, and I will be moderating today's panel. I am the Vice President of the Kentucky Psychological Foundation. That is the public education side of the Kentucky Psychological Association. I'm the former president of KPA, and I'm also a member of the Board of Directors of Families for Effective Autism Treatment. And so we're just going to admit a few more, excuse me, it's that time of year, isn't it? We're going to let a few more people in from the waiting room. But with us today, we have Matt Lowry, licensed psychological practitioner, and Lindsay Eubanks, who is an occupational therapist. And if it's okay, Matt, would you mind introducing yourself and telling the folks a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Matt Lowry. I am in a unique position in that I am one of a handful of people who are both licensed to diagnose autism and are autistic ourselves. So I'm an autistic person, I'm an autistic professional, I work with autistic people, I've got an autistic child, a lot of my family members are autistic, and I helped develop an autistic-led autism center in Louisville called Trailhouse. So if you want to check out trailhouse.org, we've got all kinds of neat resources there. The SLPs, OTs, PTs, everybody there who work there are autistic. So we've got a unique insight. I've got a book coming out. I've got a podcast called the Autistic Culture Podcast. I'm on the Kentucky Advisory Council for Autism that has the unfortunate acronym CACA. I've got a lot going on. So I'm here to talk about autism at home.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you for saying yes to being here. Lindsay, tell us a little bit about you.
Hello, I'm Lindsay Eubanks. I am an occupational therapist by trade, 22 plus years working with pediatrics, so lots of working with autism. I currently am working for the Kentucky Autism Training Center as the Family and Community Field Training Manager. So there's a school side, and I kind of do the community side for the whole state. I'm trying to bring families the resources they need. I have a 17-year-old daughter with autism, so I know that side of things. I'm from Louisville, so I'm a Louisville native. And yeah, I have a master's degree also in special education assistive technology. So I've got that education piece as well. So I'm just thrilled to be here.
Excellent, Lindsay. We're glad you're here too. And as I mentioned, KPF is the public education side of KPA, and I'm also here representing Families for Effective Autism Treatment, which is a local nonprofit that supports programming and education and resources for families who are on the autism journey. So I know there are some families here today, and I'm very appreciative of that. So today we're going to cover a lot of ground, and we hope to give you some really practical advice and useful information that hopefully can make you feel more empowered to be a healthy and consistent caregiver to your child. Part of what we want to do today is offer you some guidance, and these experts are going to give you some hard-earned tips and evidence-based practices to kind of consider and think about. None of what we're doing today is necessarily medical advice. At the end of today's presentation, we will give you some resources for how to find clinicians who are out there and have access to resources, some of which we'll be talking about today. So as I mentioned, we've got folks here from a couple of different disciplines, and we're going to cover a lot of different grounds. So I want to jump right into it, if that's okay. I think Sam's admitted everyone who's here. Matt, if it's okay, starting out with you, the initial diagnosis when parents or caregivers get that information from the evaluator or the psychologist, can you talk a little bit about kind of big picture what you want parents to sort of think about in that moment? And I know it's overwhelming and I have been through it myself, but what would you like for parents to kind of understand first?
Well, I've got a picture. So this is the one thing that you have to keep in mind about autism. So autism is genetic. It is a resistance to a protein called mTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin. Most people do a thing called autophagy, where throughout your lives, especially through teenage years, you dissolve a bunch of these dealey-bobs called dendrites and a lot of these nodes called synapses. But autistic people tend not to do that. So our lives are intense And the big thing that we deal with is a lot of order versus chaos, because we're frequently overwhelmed by sensory stuff, we're frequently overwhelmed by emotion, we're frequently overwhelmed by an abundance of data, and changing an environment in order to make things more understandable and less chaotic is the key to living a happy and healthy autistic life.
Beautiful. Thanks for the visual. That really illustrates it very well.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's that's from Supakar et al. From 2007.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Lindsay, I want to talk to you about kind of the same idea of some of the big picture things for parents and caregivers to think about. I would like you first to explain a little bit to folks about what an OT does.
Sure. I love talking about OT. It is such an important field. It is a medical profession. We are highly trained in neurology, but also psychosocial things. For pediatrics, we tend to focus on activities of daily living. So those are what our kids' occupations, that's where that term comes from. We don't just help people find jobs, but dressing, eating, writing, playing. We try to focus on a balance between independence, but also quality of life. You know, not everybody's going to have the same level of independence. So we kind of look at the whole family as a unit as well, and how we can make everyone, successful in their home. Again, sensory processing, like Matt said, is a huge piece that OTs look at, fine and gross motor skills, social participation, and then like those activities, daily living, like I said, toileting, feeding. Those are some of the big pieces that OTs work with. You can see us in clinics. You can see us in the schools. A note about school therapy, it is not the same as outpatient therapy. So sometimes that gets a little confusing for parents. It's not meant to take the place of, private therapy. It has to be related to their educational plan, and they have to have an educational disability to even be eligible for it. So I always like to give that little note just to delineate what the difference is there. And we
So
also work in the community
ahead.
sector. What'd you
That's
say?
great. I was just going to ask, so if there's an OT at your child's school, are they working potentially on different things than an OT might be working on at a clinic or perhaps in the home?
Yes, we like at school, we're not working on bathing.
Right.
And also a lot of times in the clinic, they are opposite, sometimes not allowed to work on like certain things either for insurance purposes. So school usually has to be based on their IEP goals. So that individual education plan that a lot of children have at school, that's the kind of the document that guides services in the
Okay.
school.
So based on your training, Lindsay, and your expertise in how you work with families, I want to kind of give you the same question that I asked Matt. And keep in mind that some of the viewers are here with us today, but this presentation will live in the library for families to watch in the future if they want to know what to do after the diagnosis. Coming from where your vantage point, what do you wish that families understood in those initial moments after receiving a diagnosis or when they've been considering that this might be a possibility?
That is such a good question. Like you said, overwhelming is a very common feeling. I remember that feeling. Um, the big categories that I think families need to think about are in the environment of their home in general, um, especially from the sensory perspective, just paying attention to their child and just paying attention, seeing, are they acting like they're overstimulated? Are they acting, understimulated? Just an awareness. Also, from a very practical standpoint, I would prioritize, especially in Kentucky, getting on the Michelle P waiver as soon as possible. It's a Medicaid waiver, and there is an 8 to 10 year waiting list. So that being said, I know that freaks people out, but that is one of the first things you might want to do practically, and then you can worry later about what it actually is, but you have to get on that list. And then maybe by the time they're older, they'll get services, potentially community services. It can be a game changer for families. It took my daughter 6 years to get that once she got her diagnosis.
And what does the Michelle P waiver provide? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, there's a lot of different waivers. That's just the one that often goes with a lot of autism. And they can provide a variety of different things, in-home services, behavioral supports, respite for families. So, sometimes families just need to get away for a weekend, but maybe their child might not be able to handle where they're going. Maybe they're going to an amusement park and their child does not want to go there. So that's just another service that can be provided. It's it just depends again on the child's needs. And then also finding a good OT and a good speech therapist are the two big things, because communication is such a big, I'm not a speech therapist, but communication is such a big piece. And that doesn't mean necessarily getting a device. It just means getting something that these kids can be able to express themselves, because a lot of times some behaviors that maybe are unwanted come from not being able to express yourself. So I'd say work on that, getting an OT, especially one that knows a lot about sensory processing. And then, and also just take a deep breath, because you're not going to get everything all at once. You can't therapize it out of your child. You know, sometimes parents are like, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. And I've done it myself, but sometimes you just have to take a deep breath and know that step by step, you're going to find out what you need for your child.
Great. Excellent. And Matt, a moment ago, you talked a little bit about the experience of an autistic individual is oftentimes it boils down to order versus chaos.
Yep.
And we've talked a little bit so far about stimulation and understimulation. Thinking about that, kind of how do you evaluate a home environment? I know that's not necessarily what you do, but in terms of how to soothe or how comfortable or how overstimulating or under, what are some things that families can be thinking about with particularly those notions in mind?
Well, keep in mind that we deal with a lot of nature and nurture. So autistic kids come from parents, and at least one parent might be autistic. So if you set up your home in a certain way that works for you, it might work for your kid. But also having routines, having my son loves clocks because he loves knowing when things are going to happen, what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, because due to neurology, autistic people tend to have a thing that we call expectation sensitivity. Because we like to know, we like to have a general schema of how things are going to go to alleviate that sense of anxiety that comes from the unknown. So if you set up your home in a way where, if there's snacks available, because due to interoceptive difficulties, kids might not know that they're hungry, but they might graze a little bit. So we've got healthy snacks available on a level where he can get to them. We have toys available where he can go to them. We've got, like, if he needs to watch a safety comfort show, he's really really into Peppa Pig right now. So if he wants to go chill and watch some Peppa Pig, he can go chill and watch some Peppa Pig. But ideally, it's a low demand lifestyle where we operate on logic. If he needs to take a bath, we have a time for taking a bath. We have a reason for taking a bath to not be stinky. If it's time to eat, body needs food. If it's time to go to the bathroom, because he might forget to go to the bathroom because of alexithymia and interoception difficulties, we will remind to do that. So there's a lot of extra structure there with reason, but very low demand that comes along with it, because it's just a thing that we do. It's just the way. And when we just say, yes, we must do this because of this, because there's a logical reason and a logical time, he establishes these rules in his head to combat the chaos, and life is a lot more manageable.
Hmm. And what's a respectful way, stuff happens, right? There will be
Yeah.
reasons for deviations from the schedules. And, I've experienced many meltdown in my time as a mother. Can you
Oh, yeah.
talk a little bit about, first of all, when we talk about meltdowns, a lot of the folks who are with us today and with us watching know what I'm talking about. But Matt, what's up with that?
Okay, so again, because of the chaos versus order thing, autistic kids perceive a lot more data that we might not pick up on, and they have a big confusion as to why things are going on. For instance, yesterday, I had an optometrist appointment, but they had to move it up because the doctor had to leave early, and it threw off our entire schedule for the afternoon. And he had a meltdown at the optometrist's office, and I had to, number one, when in meltdown mode, it's because the amygdala has taken over. The amygdala is a teeny little part of your brain that's responsible for the fight, flight, fawn, freeze response, and it's due to stress. And when in a meltdown state, there is no logic. It's just all amygdala. It's just all the or it's all the sympathetic nervous system going on. So when he was in the meltdown state, he could not deal with the logic of, yes, we had to change the appointment. Yes, the doctor is coming. Yes, all of this stuff. So we had to get up. We got some proprioceptive stimulation. Proprioception is the sense of space and time and sort of self-regulation. So we got up and walked up and down the hallway a little bit. We talked about other plans that we are going to make. For instance, he's a very, very picky eater, as is the way. So he cooks a lot. We've got a lot of cookbooks. We've got a lot of, plans and everything. So he knows exactly what's going in the food. He is able to make it so that sensory friendly. There's no chunks in the pizza sauce because he doesn't like the chunks. So he's 9 and he is quite a little chef so that it helps him do this. So we talked about today we are going to make a pizza. We are going to do puzzles. There are puzzles coming through the mail from Amazon because he loves puzzles. So we were able to get out of that particular environment of the waiting room, get up, walk up and down, do some self-regulation because he had emotions that were too big for his little body. So through proprioceptive stimulation, vestibular stimulation, I gave him a hug, tight, uh, man, okay, not restrictive, but it was definitely helped his body squeeze back into a more of a homeostasis state. But it was able to calm him down enough to where I was able to get the eye exam, and we were able to go on about our business. And then we came home, worked a puzzle, and he was much better. So it's getting out of that fight or flight state, and yelling will not help that. Yelling will only make it worse. Trying to logic your way out of it will not help. It'll only make it worse. Go for other sensory input to try to. You can't dam up the river, but you can change the course of the river. And if you change the course of the river, it will alleviate the meltdown by diffusing that energy.
Okay. That's really helpful. So we want to remember that rational kind of argument is not going to help you. So you
Oh,
can't argue that this is not our fault, this is the doctor's fault. You can't try to explain it away, right? We
exactly.
just have to acknowledge we know going into it to be prepared to have the snacks or have strategies for kind of getting away from or adding a different stimulation, or also in terms of mindset, knowing that sometimes going into public spaces, again, things may happen, deviations from the routine or expectation. And then as the caregivers, we know this may create a difficulty. We don't have to fear public spaces
Oh no.
necessarily, right? We can be prepared and we can acknowledge that when there's some reason for a deviation, get out of a kind of rational argument mode, be prepared, and know that they may need some ways to sort of distract away from that and be prepared to kind of know what those are and have some grace in those moments. Is kind of summing it up. Not as
Yeah, yeah.
eloquently as you said it, but
Yeah,
okay.
also having some noise canceling headphones, especially Bluetooth noise canceling headphones, because if you're able to play music or other sensory input that's very soothing, it can help de-escalate the amygdala. It can help get back into that rational state because there's something going on that is predictable. There's something going on that is enjoyable because, the schedule being thrown off, it throws the entire world into chaos. And chaos is not our friend. So making things in an unpredictable situation more predictable, more stable, more expected, that's the way to go about stuff.
Okay, that's really important for families. Be prepared to kind of think of some strategies to help them feel more familiar, more soothed, more calmed. Okay.
Mhm.
And Lindsay, Matt, you guys have mentioned a few words, vestibular and interoceptive, and
Ah,
go ahead. I was wondering if you might, Lindsay, talk a little bit about kind of posture and balance and what's going on in their bodies during some of these moments. I know every autistic child is different, but can you just say a little bit, what should families understand about this piece of it?
Oh, if I had an hour just to talk about that. But the highlights here for, beginning this journey. First, posture and coordination. So that's kind of the motor side of things. Motor clumsiness is pretty common amongst autistics. In one study, 97% of the individuals in the group scored below the 16th percentile in motor ability, with most of them below the 5th percentile. So that means out of 100 people, 95 people did better than a particular person. And also 90% of cases in that group also met criteria for developmental coordination disorder. So personally, I think that motor difficulties can be a clinically significant issue, although it's not in the diagnostic criteria. But I can almost see it sometimes, just in a posture, kind of a loosey-goosey, low muscle tone kind of way. Now, again, that's not always the case, but on the whole, I see that a lot. And that is related to sensory processing, how your brain's taking in information. And like Matt said, proprioception is a fancy word of saying just knowing where your limbs are in space. So if you close your eyes, you can reach out and grab something. That's proprioception. I heard somebody say once, who was autistic, that when they close their eyes, sometimes it feels like they're falling off the planet because they just don't have a sense of like where they have a limb. So even sometimes I've used like ankle weights with kids just so they know, oh, here's my arm. And it really has provided some students I worked with just a sense of anchoring. And sometimes kids walk on their toes for that reason as well. That's not always the case. Sometimes there is a physical issue going on there. But toe walking, I think, can be related to just seeking that input so they can feel where they are. This morning, my daughter slamming doors, sounds like a herd of cattle up above us. She has no idea. That's how she feels where her body is. And on the other side of that, you're talking about just vestibular input. So that's knowing where your head is in space. I have a very sensitive vestibular system, so I get car sick very easily. I don't love roller coasters. My son, on the other hand, is a sensory seeker. So he could go on the roller coaster 1,000 times and it really not impact him. So those sensory seekers, and again, both children are often both. It's not like one person, somebody's just a sensory seeker. You might have a sensory seeker with movement, but they hate, being touched lightly. So that's a different sensory system. But a lot of these kids have cups. They have sensory cups. Is how I like to look at it. And some kids have really little bitty cups, and it doesn't take much sensory input to just throw them into that meltdown state or that overwhelmed state. Almost like a trauma response, like you said, that fight, flight, or freeze. Their body's kind of being traumatized a little bit by the world and sensory input. And then on the other side, you have kids with large cups. So it takes a lot of sensory input to even have them just feel kind of regulated. And again, you have to pay attention. There's no one way, even amongst one child throughout the day. They might start off a day at school and have a terrible bus ride. Well, their cup's already halfway full before they even get in the door of a school. But other times you have kids that have a nice, relaxing morning, and they've got plenty of room for some extra sensory input during the day. So that's in a nutshell, that's how you can kind of talk about those posture and sensory seeking, and then sensory avoiding, like Matt said too, the noises are often an issue. But then you get the tactile issues where they don't want to wear the headphones, even though it's like, which sensory thing is bothering me more right now? Is it the touch of the headphones, or is it worth it to put the headphones on because it's so loud? So again, it's a process of observing, problem solving, and really listening to the child. They're telling you things by their behaviors, and they're a lot of times too, people don't know that shutdown is also a behavior, so to speak. So I've had kids that literally would not speak the whole day because they were just so overwhelmed. And once they stopped going to the cafeteria for lunch and they had a quiet environment, we found out that he could talk and he was on grade level. So those are just kind of that's how much sensory input and sensory processing can really impact a child throughout the day. So I know that's a whole training in itself, but
That's great, though. It really tells us a lot about how it can be overpowering and not something that can be talked out of, right? It feels like their body's under attack.
well, when your brain, like, I know a lot of people have seen this, this is your thinking brain, this is your, fight or flight brain. When they're overwhelmed, there's words, try to use less words, and you might get somewhere.
Okay. And Matt, Lindsay kind of mentioned, maybe not going to the crowded cafeteria might be useful for a child who gets overstimulated in that way. Self-advocacy, like being able to say, here's what I need, obviously is very difficult for a young student to be able to do in a school setting. So there are reasons, there are IEPs and the like. But can you talk a little bit about self-advocacy, like being able to say how I need this room to feel, this interaction to feel? I know that that's, again, a big question, but how do you sort of think about that?
It is essential. It's essential for everyone to be able to have healthy boundaries, but especially for autistic kids, because autistic kids are perceived as weird. We are perceived as different, and we are perceived as it. Instead of meltdowns and instead of shutdowns and the situational mutism that Lindsay mentioned, uh, it's perceived as oppositional. It's perceived as defiant. It's perceived as
Willful,
we
yeah.
are, yeah, it's perceived as we are being intentionally disrespectful. So a lot of adults take it upon themselves to force autistic kids to do the things that the adults want to do. Like, you have to go to the cafeteria, you have to do this, you have to do this. And this is one of the reasons why autistic girls, 94% of autistic girls experience sexual assault before they turn 18, because due to social issues, girls are taught that you should not speak up, you should not be difficult, you should not do this. And again, they internalize this, and it leads to people with bad intentions getting them into bad situations. So healthy boundaries, being able to step up and stand up for yourself and say, this is not good, even if it's a meltdown or a shutdown, because that is in fact language, that is in fact an expression. Because again, with the chaos, we have a thing called noise complexity, where it's not about the volume, it's about the number of sources of noise. And in a cafeteria, it can be like 400 or 500 kids all talking at the same time. The cafeteria sounds from the people cooking, the various radios from the school personnel, people coming in and coming out. We have process complexity, where there's just too many details going on at the same time, and it overstimulates us. So we melt down, we shut down. That is in fact a language. In a calm state, being able to say, like in an IEP meeting or something, that you need to go to the library. The library is our friend, because it is a quiet place. It's usually filled with adults who understand the need for quiet. Lots of books to read. It's a very, very pleasant space for us. So being able to change that around and saying, yes, my needs matter. My needs are important. It's important through adulthood, because adults usually hit burnout. It's an intense state of exhaustion and lack of functioning. And especially autistic women don't usually, get a diagnosis until mid 30s, early 40s, because that's when, with all of the kid responsibilities, the work responsibilities, the house responsibilities, a pet or two, dealing with aging parents, they become overwhelmed with all this and they cannot function. And that is largely because they were taught that their boundaries don't matter, that they have to take care of everyone around them. And it just becomes too much and they get crushed. So, learning this at a very, very early age, that your needs matter and that your needs deserve to be respected, and you can do things in a different way, even if it's unconventional, it is essential to survival.
On that note, we've talked here already today about the notion of kind of understanding your child's struggles in the moment, being prepared for them. How should parents model to a child that it's okay to ask for their needs to be met or to speak their needs? And I recognize every family, every child is certainly different, but that advocacy for oneself would hopefully start at home in a respectful environment for that sort of talk. Can you say a
Mhm.
little bit about that, like how you show a child that it's okay and in fact encouraged to do that?
So once again, autism is genetic, and you usually find at least one autistic parent, whether or not they know it. Because again, there are autistic people, regardless of having a diagnosis. We've been around since the beginning of humanity, and presumably will be around until the end of humanity. So we often get overstimulated by our kids' overstimulation. When our kids are doing a palilalia thing where they repeat the same sound over and over and over and over again, it might be overstimulating to us. So I might pull out my noise canceling headphones and say, Daddy's a little bit overstimulated right now. I'm going to put these on so I can calm down a little bit. And my son will be like, oh, okay. So that teaches that number one, it's a boundary, and number two, this is a response to that boundary. If I say, I'm very tired, I would like to go take a nap. Can we go take a nap? And he will go take a nap too, because I'm saying what my needs are. I'm saying, I feel hungry. I am going to go get a snack. And he learns that, oh, when we feel hungry, we can go get snacks. And just explaining this flat out, this is an important part of what we call autistic culture because we're passing these lessons down to our children, and it's an important life lesson that they will value, they will understand, and it will prevent a lot of autistic distress that we have experienced through our lifetime because they'll grow up knowing that this is normal. And just by vocalizing it, by demonstrating it, by saying that you have needs and you are meeting your needs, do it in a respectful way. uh, Autistic people, due to the hyperconnected neurons, we are bottom up processors and bottom up socializers. So, whereas most people might say, I will listen to that authority figure because they are an authority figure, I will listen to that adult because they are an adult. We don't do that. It leads to a lot of problems in school because we treat teachers as equals, we treat principals as equals. If the Pope came to the school, we would treat the Pope as an equal. So treating your child as more or less an intellectual equal and saying, I need to do this, I need to do this respectfully instead of barking orders at them, it's a way to demonstrate respect and demonstrate how to get respect from others. So, yeah, just being upfront, honest, and being very direct in why you are doing what you're doing, what need is being met. It teaches them how to do the same because they'll model you.
That's great. Lindsay, we talked a little bit about the difficulties a child might encounter during the school day, the stimulation issues and the like, certainly the social issues. Sometimes parents struggle with after school, all parents, not just the parents of children who are on the spectrum. And so knowing that there may be unpredictable kind of things happening throughout the school day, what do you think parents should understand about kind of the way to welcome your child when they come home from school? That can often be a really difficult transition period for children.
Well, ideally, you would be able to be the one that is welcoming them home, because it is tricky when they are going to after school care or if they're going to grandma's house. That can be tricky because not all people either listen to the child or see it the same way. So on your end, I would try to educate the people that are maybe picking up your child, after school care, grandma, grandpa, um, that they're not being bad if they're, not following your directions, or, kind of that old school thinking of discipline. Also visuals, if, once your kid is home, I mean, at school, visuals are important in general with autistics. I've also heard them say that it's their first language, and then words can sometimes be their second language. So what I did with my own child is we had a schedule of what was happening that day with pictures, and they weren't pretty pictures. Sometimes I would use a dry erase board. You don't have to have board maker and laminate. I personally like that, but not everybody has those resources. So just kind of like, we're doing this, we're doing this, and we're doing this, and then just, checking it off. That has brought a lot of comfort to my own child and to me, because I kind of know, I like to know what's happening as well. And then like, having those sensory objects, kind of bags in different places. Like I have something in the car, or I have something, in their room, in the bathroom, just so they have some options to calm down, or just to regulate, and helping them see what they need to regulate. Like in my daughter, as she got older, she needs a long chunk of quiet time in her room in the dark when she has socialized too much, or if she's had too much of a long day at school. And she also has to plan ahead her breaks. So like this weekend, she has she's in theater, she has a birthday party. So we have to plan her breaks so that we go, okay, pace yourself socially. Take a big chunk out before you go to this party, and it's okay. A lot of times, myself included, I'm like, no, we got to keep going. We got to be productive. We've got to go, go, go. And just letting her know that it's okay to take breaks. And she needs more breaks socially and sensory wise than maybe I do, or maybe her dad does, or definitely her brother. So again, visuals, sensory supports, and just try not to make them feel bad for their needs that they have. And don't expect them to come home and do homework immediately unless they want to. They might like to get that out of the way. But just being flexible as much as you can as a parent. I know that's easier said than done, especially if you have multiple children. So those are some of the and snacks also, because like Matt said, not knowing that you're hungry is a big issue with our own child, and almost having to put on a schedule like, hey, don't forget you haven't eaten since breakfast. I know you don't feel it, but you really do. Like, your body has to have food. And so even just having, like, reminding them after school we eat a snack if you haven't had one. So those are just kind of popcorning some ideas there.
I see we keep returning to the same ideas. So they know what to expect. They know sort of what the schedule is, and we are respectful of their needs and their capabilities and their limits, and that we provide sensory input that can be useful to them either in a routine way or in kind of an emergency or in a difficult moment or after a difficult day. So see the themes that you guys keep returning to. I sure do appreciate that.
Can I
Going,
add one more thing to that?
sure, of course, yes.
I'm talking about someone who is speaking. They have language that they can speak. Just because they're not speaking doesn't mean they can't tell you what they need. So sensory visuals. You could have a kid point to how they're feeling or what they're doing. So I just wanted to kind of remind people that sometimes we forget some of the kiddos that maybe aren't speaking verbally. They can still most of the time tell us. And we can teach them those skills too. That's something that you could kind of wrap around in maybe therapy, things like that. So just wanted to add that thought.
Okay. Matt, in terms of therapy, talk therapy, psychotherapy for children who are on the spectrum, individuals who are on the spectrum, can you talk a little bit about sort of, is that a common practice, or what should parents understand? Because we know oftentimes autism spectrum disorder is comorbid with other mental health concerns. What does it look like? Again, recognizing everyone is different, every family is different.
Well, like Lindsay said, the number one big one is that non-speaking does not mean non-thinking. There are a lot, again, because of the spectrum, there are some people who are hyperlexic and very good at speaking, and there are some people that have apraxia and they can't speak. My own son is a Gestalt language processor, which means that he speaks in phrases, mostly from Peppa Pig these days. So if there is an idea that he wants to convey, he will go through an entire line from Peppa Pig to convey that idea. And people who don't understand what that means are confused by it. They think it's a non sequitur. They think that he's, I don't know, some inhuman, unfeeling thing. But he's got an idea that he's communicating in the best way he can. And that's very important. And that's a big barrier in traditional psychotherapy. Another one is our alexithymia, because interoception is this sense of what's happening inside our bodies, right? Oh, I've got an image for this. Let me pull this up real quick because I call this the gummy bear metaphor. So we are taught in therapy school that people experience physiological sensations all throughout their bodies, right? And these, when you have this intense physiological sensation of pleasantness throughout your body, warmth, or, whatever, we call that happiness. When you feel a lack of sensation or cold, you might feel depression. I was unaware that the phrase to get cold feet means that neurotypical people feel cold in their extremities when they feel anxious. I thought it was just a weird metaphor. So, autistic people tend to have headaches, chest pains, digestive issues. We get sweaty. And then we have to figure out what that means, because we know that we get hangry when we're hungry, but we might not interpret that as being hungry. We might get my son refers to my belly button hurts when he needs to go to the bathroom, so he has to go poop. But he doesn't really associate that yet. He just goes, "Oh no, belly hurts," and then you have to explain. You have to be an emotional translator, because we are essentially cognitive processors. We get that data and we are not necessarily, it's not our native form of communication. Whereas most people, it's as obvious as being poked in the arm versus poked in the leg. You know what you're experiencing, you know how to deal with it. It's one gummy bear. One gummy bear is hungry, one gummy bear is sleepy, one gummy bear is, agitated. But ours are a whole bunch of gummy bears melted together into a multicolored, multi-flavored, gigantic mess. And we chew and we chew and we chew, which leads to the shutdowns, the meltdowns, the situational mutism, and all that, because we get overloaded with whatever's going on in here. And again, when we go to traditional therapy, a therapist might ask, "Where do you feel that?" And then we will say, "In my brain, where my feelings live." And then it's sort of pointless to us. CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, is really effective for non-autistic people, but for us, because we don't do that, it has the results are questionable at best. We don't respond well to behaviorism because, again, it's not a behavioral issue, it's a sensory issue. It's all this stuff going on inside our head. So, autistic friends and I have created autistic centered therapy, which is essentially four parts: autistic interpersonal therapy, like I was talking about before, modeling how we deal with stuff like, "I feel hungry, I'm going to go eat, I feel this," and showing sort of how to live an autistic life, dealing with autistic trauma, like, again, being subjected to all this bombardment of stimuli all day long when you can't escape it. It's like being sprayed with a hose every single day. And you're going to get learned helplessness, you're going to get depression, you're going to get anxiety, you're going to get a lot of other negative stuff, and that needs to be addressed. The advocacy work, because again, we need to have self advocacy, we need to advocate for the community, we need to do all that, even as children. Like I said, you need to say, "These are my needs." And then finally, what I call automotive maintenance, maintaining our meat bodies. Because again, we don't recognize the need to eat, we don't recognize the need to sleep. So we have to, say, "Hey, have you had a snack today?" And when I do therapy with people, I will say, "Hey, when's the last time you ate?" Yesterday." "Well, why don't we get a snack while we talk?" And when's the last time you drank? I think sometime last night. Well, let's get a drink while we talk. And I'll sit here with my gigantic mug, and we'll self-regulate, or we'll co-regulate with each other while we do all this kind of stuff. So again, a lot of traditional therapy focuses on how to do what the adults want you to do, because the adults are the ones that send you to therapy. But we have to look at it from, again, the bottom up position of, you've got this need, this need, this need, this need, this need. And once these needs are taken care of, then we can go to Maslow's hierarchy and get to better, higher things like, self-love, community, finding a career, finding ways to do better things. But as long as we're dysregulating, our meat bodies are falling apart, we can't do any of that. Uh, so
One
yeah,
of the first questions a parent might ask themselves is kind of understanding what the child's needs are at a very basic fundamental level,
oh
and
yeah.
see if there are any kind of complicating issues there. And then I know with my child, so long as, again, his basic needs are met and he gets plenty of time to work on his hyperfixations, and as little as possible of the stuff he doesn't like, it's going to be a pretty good day, most likely. So I do want to ask about, sometimes children on the spectrum, again, recognizing everybody's different. I want to keep saying that, but hyperfixations and children really being invested into a particular topic or thing. I want to hear what you have to say about that, because I have come to understand what a beautiful thing that it can be, but I also know that parents worry that it can limit a child's ability to make friends and things like that. So, what do you got?
Ah, okay. So, as far as the friendship thing goes, this actually helps us make friends, because think of your child not as a child, but as a grad student doing a dissertation. When kids get into this hyperfixation, we call it monotropism, this laser focus into whatever it is that really, really pulls us. Uh, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi is a researcher in the 1970s that talked about a flow state with a capital F. And when you're in that monotropic focus state, when you are building a world in Minecraft for 8 hours, you are so laser focused, your brain switches over from alpha waves to theta waves, which is a form of meditation. And it's very healing and very regulating to be able to deep dive into this. And again, every autistic person I know, except for people in burnout and with extreme depression, and because you can't get into that flow state, you can't participate in your desired activities when you're depressed and when you're anxious because, again, emotional dysregulation. But when people are researching their desired topics, whether it's sharks or horses or trains, or in many cases, human beings, we get into that flow state, and it's something that really tickles us. And if you encourage that, that's going to be a big driver for self-education later on, because one of the biggest flaws of the educational system now is that it's mandatory and it makes education forced instead of desirable. And autistic kids, when they seek to enter that monotropic flow state, they're going to absorb everything they can. I've got an entire wall of books behind me because I love to read. I love to learn. My son loves to read. He loves to learn. And that's going to be a thing that saves him, because when he gets older and gets into like college, he's going to be very self-driven to learn about a particular topic and go in that particular area. Mine happened to be psychology, which is why I'm talking to you now. A lot of autistic people go into the sort of human-based sciences, learning about social work or psychology or how humans operate, because we find it fascinating. We want to learn how to human, and we get there. And that's why you find an above average number of autistic people in these fields, who know so much more about other people, because that's what drove us. We really want to learn and want to know and want to accumulate all of the facts and all of the figures, and we have this encyclopedic knowledge about such things. And autistic kids are often referred to as little professors because they will know everything there is to know about dinosaurs or horses or trains or movies or whatever. And that's what I love it, because I'm always entertained by the new facts that people will come up with. And that's actually why we do the podcast, because people bring up, hey, have you done an episode about My Little Pony? I love My Little Pony. And it turns out that the woman who created My Little Pony is autistic because she loved horses. So it provided a lot of interesting stuff for us to learn and for us to tell other people about. And this leads to a thing called penguin pebbling, where we, in order to socialize with other people, we like to give out fun facts. We like to give out bits of information. We like to give things to people like a penguin would give a pebble to another penguin. So, whereas a lot of people might say, I don't want to hear about trains, stop talking about trains. If you go to the right people, they're going to love talking about trains or Minecraft or Roblox. The Kentucky Railway Museum, down in Claremont, Kentucky. Everyone who works there is autistic. And when we go down for the Thomas the Train Day, you'll go up to an adult and say, "How you doing?" And the adult will say, "Did you know that I worked on a diesel locomotive?" And I'll be like, "No, tell me all about that." And then just pull out the popcorn and you're ready for a fascinating, flow of information, because it's really cool. But that's how we socialize. We don't do the small talk. Uh,
That's really interesting. I have therapy clients whom I see not on the spectrum, but middle-aged folks, whatever. And we talk about identifying ways to feel more at peace. So in some ways, I imagine what you're talking about with regard to the flow state. Like adults have to actively think about what would I do if I could just be at peace thinking about what I want to do, being engaged in an activity that I want to do. It's so evasive for them. And you're saying once a child might have identified, you've identified a way that they can feel at peace, be really into what it is that they're into, to show respect for that and curiosity about that and support for that can be so enriching in so many ways.
Very self-regulating. And when Csikszentmihalyi was researching this, he identified that people with a specific personality were more easily entering the flow state, and he called that the autotelic personality. High intrinsic motivation, high drive for essentially, he wanted to catch them all. Pokemon is an ideal version of the flow state because you want to collect all these information, you want to fill out your Pokedex, you want to do your research, you want to do all this stuff, and that's everything about the autotelic personality that he identified. And yeah, it's very self-regulating. It's a form of meditation, and it helps us calm ourselves because it's something that we love, and therefore it's something that we're good at. And in a very chaotic, unpredictable world, there is always trains, horses, or Pokemon.
Okay. I'm going to ask you both one last question today. Lindsay, I'm going to start with you. You come home from the evaluator's debrief session and you've received the diagnosis and you're overwhelmed. And we've talked a little bit about, sign up for the waiver, consider the clinicians you want to have on your support team, all of this. But looking around your home, and we talked about visuals, a little bit about routine. Is there anything else in terms of maybe low cost or really practical adaptations that families can think about to make the environment more amenable and supportive to a child who's on the spectrum?
Yes, absolutely. We have so much more power than we think we do as parents to create an atmosphere that's comfortable for everyone. So I always like to remind parents and myself, like, to have agency. Like, you can create a comfortable environment. Again, predictability and routine as much as you can. Visuals, like I said, and then structured transitions. So, like, when it's time to go, don't just say, oh man, we gotta go, and just they're in the middle of playing with their trains, and that's probably not going to be a happy moment because they didn't get a warning. Or and not that you can always do that, if there's a fire alarm, you have to manage that, but as much as you can, like, warn them or set a little visual timer. Hey, in 5 minutes when this goes away, we have to put this away and go get in the car because we got to go to school. Things like that. Even songs. There's a lot of transition songs that are out there that you can, like, the cleanup song at school is a popular one. And then calm and organized spaces as much as you are able. Like Matt said, sometimes you have your own internal disorganization and your house is cluttered. So as much as you are able, put things back in the same place. Or again, when I taught my daughter how to put her laundry away, we had to have little, this is the category for pants, this is shorts. And we had to have visuals because she really just could not mentally sort it at first. Now she can do it, but we had to start with that. Again, sensory tools, we've talked about that. There's so many do-it-yourself videos out there about how to you can make weighted, like, not blankets, but like you put them over your scarf almost. You can make them with rice and duct tape and plastic bags. So there's lots of things out there. And on the handout that I'm going to have everybody have, there's a lot of, like, links to things like that. Opportunities for movement, even just a ball they could bounce on. Those little balance boards you can get at Target sometimes. Just climbing, heavy work, carrying the laundry basket upstairs, downstairs. Chores are a great form of heavy work, although they're not always preferred. And then, like I mentioned earlier, just a family-wide awareness. The siblings, husbands, wives, grandma, neighbors, as much as you can educate appropriately. You don't want to go up to someone and say, hey, by the way, this is how you need to treat my child. But just being mindful and paying attention. So those are some of my top tips for home.
That's great. Thank you, Lindsay. And Matt, what do you think in terms of walking back in the house or kind of on a day-to-day basis and creating an environment that is as supportive as possible?
I think Lindsay's right about the transitions because of our hyperconnected brains, we are essentially freight trains, and it takes us an entire mile to get going, and it takes us 5 miles to slow down, as opposed to someone who is a Fiat stopping, starting, turning on a dime. We we require a lot of leeway in these transition periods, and that's a reason why it might be difficult to have a kid get into a bath because they're dry. They like being dry. Then they have to get into the wet, and then they like being wet and they don't want to get out and be dry again. And then, transition from home to school, school to home. These rituals are important for us. That, for instance, like Mr. Rogers, as soon as he comes in the house, he changes off and puts on his sweater, puts on his comfy shoes, sings a song, and then you transition from the outside world to the inside world. And then when it's time to leave, you sing a song, put on your other clothes, gone out. It's a ritual every single time. And when you have that ritual, it helps uh, do that transition from one mindset to another. And if you have transitions for everything, it can be much more relaxing, and the kid won't be as overstimulated. The adults won't be overstimulated. It works out better for everybody. So, yeah, find a song, find a routine, change into your comfy cardigan, whatever you need to do, have that ritual so that the transition is much easier.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think that is all of my questions for today. Folks, if you're watching, we are very interested in knowing what you'd like to know more about. So if there are any topics, questions that you have about the autism journey, how to be a healthy caregiver, Feed of Louisville, MHA Kentucky, and the Kentucky Psychological Foundation intend to continue this as a webinar series. We'll be talking about sibling mental health. We'll be talking about school choices and supporting your child in a learning environment. We're going to talk a little bit about persons of color and particular issues around being on the spectrum. We have several webinars planned, but we'd like to hear from you. So if there are any topics you'd like to know more about, please share those in the chat and we will take note of those. KPF has provider resource tools as well, and so Sam is going to put those into the chat to kind of assist you in finding clinicians and providers who can be part of your family's team. And Hannah is with us, and she's going to tell you a little bit about MHA Kentucky and their role and what the work that they do. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. We are excited about all of these amazing webinars with KPA and KPF. And Mental Health America of Kentucky is a mental health advocacy and education organization. If you visit our website, www.mhaky.org, we have free anonymous online mental health screenings, as well as mental health toolkits and other great resources. And our participation in these webinars is thanks to funding from the Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities.
So if you have any questions, we are happy to take those right now. If you want to add them to the chat box, please also, like I said, if you have any topics that you'd like to know more about, we'd like to hear more about those too. KPF is the public education side of the Kentucky Psychological Association, and Sam can put up the link for KPF once more if you're interested in making a donation to support more of these types of webinars. We'd love to see you, and we'd love to chat with you more about this stuff. It's really important to all of us. Matt Lowry and Lindsay Eubanks, thank you all for saying yes to this and sharing your lived experience and your expertise. It has been invaluable. I wish I had you years ago. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Rachel, we did just have a question come through in the chat. Do you all have a minute to answer this?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So Jen asked, how do you find the balance between catering to their need for routine and structure, but also helping them to learn to be adaptable, since they will need this skill to operate in our world? And then there's another question as well, how to help your child learn to advocate for themselves when they may not exactly know what they need.
Matt, I'm going to let you would it be okay if we talk a little bit about the first question?
Yeah, yeah. So think of your home as an oasis, and again, the kids are going to be trekking through the desert and having all these harsh conditions throughout their life. but they're going to come back home to your space and be safe and recharge and refill their water and do all this stuff. They need to know that there are going to be little chunks of unexpectedness throughout their life, but they will have this core stability at home because it's like having a foundation of concrete versus a foundation of jello. My life is built around structure because I'm a therapist. I need a lot of structure in my life because I'm going to be dealing with a lot of chaos in clients' lives. I'm going to be dealing with a lot of unexpected things, whether it's when I'm doing evaluations, I don't know who's coming in. Uh, Today, answering whatever questions appear. I don't know what people are going to ask. It's going to be very, very unexpected. So I am able to be adaptable when needed because I have my sense of safety and security at home. Everything else is within my control. So I have that emotional bandwidth to handle the unknown. And this is a thing that you can model for your children and saying, boy, today was pretty stressful. I didn't expect to do all that stuff at the Qdoba or anything, but boy, I'm glad we are home where it is nice and quiet and I have whatever helps you get comfortable. So model that. And again, that's another thing for healthy boundaries. Modeling the healthy boundaries, and you say, boy, that person at the Qdoba was very rude today, but I'm glad that we're home and I'm with people that I like because life is indeed manageable. Look at this. And you are your child's first and most extensive teacher. They're going to do what you do. So if you can say, I can handle the unknown, I can handle this, I can handle that, and how you handle it, they'll do that too. So uh, I think that you got a great, great power to be a positive force in your child's world.
To the other question, I think in a similar vein, Matt talked extensively a few minutes ago about modeling advocacy for oneself. So saying, as the parent, as the caregiver, I'm hungry, so I'm going to eat something. I'm having a hard time, so I'm going to sit still, or I'm feeling kind of tired, so I'm going to take a nap. And being able to model first that when we have a need, it's helpful to kind of identify it and soothe it. So when something's wrong, we try to figure out what it is and we soothe it. And then showing that same level of respect to your child, where if they have a need, you understand it and you respect it, and you don't first envision it as being willful or hurtful or, manipulative, but you understand that they have a need that you can help meet and that their needs matter to you. So you've modeled to them to advocate for yourself, to advocate for themselves. And then out there in the world, it's not just you smoothing the road for them, which can feel like a big part of the overwhelm at the beginning is how do I make life easier and as best as possible for my child, but you teach them to be able to do that for themselves too. So it starts with you being able to say what your needs are. So hope we've covered those questions. I have a therapy client here in a couple of minutes, so I'm going to have to jump off too. Thank you everyone for coming to be with us today. Thank you, Matt and Lindsay, for being here. Thank you, Feet of Louisville, MHA Kentucky, and the Kentucky Psychological Foundation for supporting this. Everyone have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.